All right, we're live. Hey everyone, I'm T. Krulos. Heidi, you froze up.
You froze up.
Oh, no, we're having some technical difficulties tonight. We're having some technical difficulties tonight.
That's cool.
Let's
It's
try
just cool.
again. I'm T. Krulos.
I'm Heidi Erickson.
We're doing T's Weird Week news. Very
Yeah,
exciting week this week.
it was.
Yeah.
Oh, so many things. Oh, the lead story today is how T. Krulos is fucking awesome and won a fancy award yesterday from a very prestigious organization for being awesome.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes,
you
I won the Milwaukee Press Club Excellence in Journalism Award in the short hard news feature category.
do.
Milwaukee Press Club is actually the oldest continuously running press club in North America. They've been around since 1885. And it was a really an honor to me because unlike like the Shepherd Express Best of, which is just kind of a popularity contest where people vote online, this one your work is actually judged by your peers at different press clubs, and
Sure.
they select who the winner is. So it was very cool.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
the story is about these kind of crazy, I'll say, guys or people, I should say, that call themselves citizen journalists. And what they do is they just kind of strap like a GoPro cam on themselves and they get right in the thick of it at different protests, and events like that. And they live stream what's going on. Um, and they're not really in it to make a ton of money, but they do make some money through posting like a Cash App or Venmo link, so they can pay for their travel, and they kind of just fly around the country or travel around the country and go from event to event, hoping to get some exciting footage. I think
Sure.
that they're kind of adrenaline junkies.
Oh, for sure.
Like
They have to be.
they're hoping the shit's gonna hit the fan so they can
Yeah.
be that. So, there was this very awful night in Kenosha, Wisconsin in August, where this sort of ad hoc militia had gathered there because they wanted to protect the buildings from protesters. Because, protesters had burnt down buildings in Kenosha after the shooting of Jacob Blake. So, on that night, that's when Kyle Rittenhouse, who's a 17-year-old guy, ended up killing two people and severely injuring a third.
Yeah.
And I was glued to the TV. Over this last year, I'm going to tell you, I've watched more cable news than I have
Right.
my entire previous life combined times
Yeah.
30 for sure.
Well, all these things
Um,
were happening all this
yeah,
last year.
all the the pandemic news,
Mhm.
the protests and social unrest, of course, crazy Donald Trump saying and doing something crazy every single day.
Mhm.
So, I was watching this footage very closely, especially because Kenosha, if you're not familiar, is it's in me and Heidi's neck of the woods.
Yeah.
It's south of Milwaukee. It's in between Milwaukee and Chicago, so not too far away. And I noticed that a lot of this footage they were showing from that night had watermarks on it. And there was a watermark for the Rundown Live, which is a media platform that I'm familiar with. But I noticed there was one called BG on the Scene and another one called CJTV. And I was like, wow, these guys are the ones who actually got all of this footage and were able to sort of piece together what happened that night
Yeah.
because of their work. And if they hadn't gotten that, I think it's entirely possible that Rittenhouse would have walked right past
Oh,
the
yeah.
police and would not have been identified. So,
It seemed pretty clear from that footage that they got that they had no intention of arresting that kid.
Yeah.
There was that other piece of footage that you mentioned in the article where the police were talking to these like militia people who were, I mean, to be fair, things did get burnt down. I don't remember exactly what got burnt down in Kenosha.
A lot.
Um, I mean, a lot of things got burned down in Kenosha. I distinctly remember hearing about one of the property owners there um, getting interviewed by somebody who was also a citizen journalist, and um, they were asking them, you know, aren't you? How do you feel? Aren't you angry? And the guy being like, somebody got shot. Like, I'm insured. Let them burn it. Like, whatever. There was a lot of mixed feelings going on in Kenosha, but there was footage of the police going up to these militia people who were the ones who were armed. There weren't a lot of protesters who were walking around with like AK-47s and shit. That wasn't a thing, or the cops had to take them out. Walked up to these guys, including Kyle Rittenhouse. He was in the group that they videotaped, and the cops handing them water and saying how much the police appreciated these militia guys being out there helping them. He probably would have. They probably never would have caught him. They would have let him walk right out. In fact, they might have even ultimately ended up trying to blame it on the protesters, which is what I think probably would have happened. Because it would
Hmm.
have been easy. It would have been easy to do.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
very easy.
Yeah. So, you know, I kind of saw that they had between their footage, you could follow this timeline, pretty, you know, down to the minutes of what happened.
Yeah,
And I just became curious about citizen journalists because I'm like, I'm sure this is a group of characters.
yeah,
And actually, I went down to Kenosha a couple days after that happened, just because I kind of wanted to check out the scene myself.
yeah.
And I saw a group of citizen journalists kind of standing on a street corner comparing notes. And I was like, these guys are interesting. They're interesting guys.
Do
Um,
regular like mainstream journalists do that? Do they like stand around comparing notes with each other? It seems like they're kind of competitive and they probably wouldn't actually do that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is most mainstream journalists, they kind of go to bed at a reasonable hour and they maintain quite a bit of distance. And part of that is, you know, kind of both sides of the aisle don't really like a lot of media. Um, and
Sure.
and they're standing there with like a big camera and a microphone that says Fox News or something or TMJ4 or whatever.
Right.
Whereas the citizen journalists, you know, they are kind of immersed in the crowd itself, like they're marching down the street with the crowd.
Right.
So they blend in a little bit better, and because of that, you're getting footage like right in the thick of it as it happens.
I say I
So,
love this about the future. I love the future. This idea of like gonzo journalism as like the real thing, the real deal. Because these
mm,
people aren't being paid by anybody. They're not on anybody's payroll. They have nobody to answer to at all. Like they can go where they want to go and do what they want to do. But that being said, if they get into trouble, if something happens to them, there's nobody, there's no company. CNN's not gonna
right.
try and get them bailed out of jail, is not gonna pay for their medical bills. Like they're doing all this on their own volition. There's one part in the article, which was that in Milwaukee Magazine?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was in the a print version, and a slightly longer version is on their website too.
Mm.
And we'll link to that article in the show notes when the
Yeah.
podcast is produced here.
It's completely worth reading. It was interesting material and very topical, obviously, but it was also, I really liked the way that you put it together because you talked a little bit about who these people were and how you got into it. And then you did that timeline that you were talking about. So it gave people reading it the opportunity to kind of see exactly what was happening, almost like from these two things like colliding, these two perspectives, because they came at it from different sides of the protest and like met in the middle essentially at this penultimate moment.
Yeah.
But the one guy was like, he ran towards the gunshots and was like, I have to get this footage. But then he stopped and he was like, do I have to get this footage though? Like, do I have to get this footage? I'm pretty sure my mom loves me and I actually don't
Yeah.
need to get this footage. So
Yeah.
he pulled back because he was like, I'm gonna get fucking shot. And the other guy, I don't think necessarily meant to be as close as he was, but he happened to be there when the guy with the skateboard, I can't remember his name. I should, because he's the guy who took Rittenhouse down. He knocked him down and hit him with a skateboard,
Yeah.
and he got shot in the chest for his troubles. And the other guy got shot in the arm, so he ran to go help the guy who got shot in the arm and ended up eyeball to eyeball with
Yeah.
this scared kid, which
Yeah.
he mentioned. He was like, this, I saw this guy, he was this kid, and he was clearly terrified and walking around with a loaded semi-automatic weapon.
Yeah.
He's going to shoot somebody, not because he's a monster, but because he's a terrified kid who thinks he's playing Call of Duty
Right.
and like didn't want to, like, he said he had a moment where he didn't know for sure if the kid was going to shoot him because he was like,
Yeah.
you know,
That's really what I think made the article good, was that I just happened to get really good interviews with three of the citizen journalists, and they were very candid about me, about how terrified they were that night,
right,
and how they're motivated to get out there and do it, but it's kind of a you can find yourself in a very frightening situation
right.
like that.
I think it's
So
interesting because there's been a lot of talk about how we're all kind of citizen journalists now, and we
yeah,
have to perceive ourselves that way specifically because the woman who shot the footage of George Floyd's murder, um, she was a woman of color in a situation where there was a clearly like not safe, unhinged person who was telling her that she needed to stop filming, and anything could have happened to her. Anything could have happened to her. They could have done anything to her, and she kept filming. She kept recording, even when several cops threatened her and told her that she needed to stop recording. And if it wasn't for her recording that incident, like there would have been no trial. There'd have been no question, and not just because she recorded it, but because she had the capacity to share that information instantaneously on the internet. So she shared it and the world saw it. She didn't have to hope that CNN picked it up or that CBS News wanted to, show the footage. She had access to social media and very shortly the world saw it. That piece of footage was shared like something outrageous, like 200 or 300 million times it was viewed. Uh,
yeah, it really changed the world, and
yeah,
and like you said, it's a very similar situation. If she would not have taken that video footage, this would have been paperwork. No one would have known
right.
probably.
Right. Well, I mean
So
that's true of a lot of stuff. Like I forget who it was that said it just recently. They were talking about racism specifically, and had said that racism wasn't getting worse; it was just getting recorded. It's like all the talk of like, especially if you come from a certain demographic of people who don't have had the privilege, have been lucky enough to not have to think about some of the real, truly terrifying and vile shit that people have to go through. You wouldn't necessarily believe it. It sounds way more dramatic than your life experience, so you have no basis for comparison. But it's really difficult to deny it when you have footage of like Orlando Castile, like in the car with his fiance and their little child when all that stuff went down. Like that's heartrending stuff. That shit stays with you forever. And I wonder, like, I don't know, do you feel like we kind of have an obligation, like as citizens, as individuals, to like be ready to record that, to be citizen journalists when we're called upon to do so?
yeah, I think so, absolutely.
Yeah,
You're in the case of these stories that we've just talked about, it was very important. So you could, you know, um, change someone's life or capture someone who needs to be captured. And everyone has cameras on their phones now, so it's easy to do. So
yeah,
I'm going to mention, if you're watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, you can comment, and if your comment or question is appropriate, I'll put it up on the screen, and we'll read it or answer your question. Um, but some people will also be listening. We do the live segment here, and then Andrew, our sound engineer, puts together the episode, and we publish it as a more polished podcast. So season 2, episode 1 is actually dropping tomorrow on Friday. And then you'll be hearing me say this a week from tomorrow for episode 2. Okay, so one of the things about these citizen journalists, as I mentioned, I was like, these are characters for sure, and I already knew that because I knew one of them. Kristan T. Harris is one of the people involved with the Rundown Live. Um, I like
Mhm.
Kristan a lot. I think he's an interesting guy. I don't always agree with some of his ideas and conclusions, but I certainly admire the fact that he was willing to get out there on the street and try to figure out what was going on.
Yeah,
And a lot of people watch these live streams because remember, last summer, there was a pandemic going on. There's a lot of people who did not feel safe going outside because
yeah,
of the pandemic and because of some of the protests. So a lot of people wanted to know what was going on in the streets of their city, but didn't really want to leave their house. So,
absolutely.
so this was a good way for them to kind of get an eye on the street to see what was happening. But Kristan he is a real interesting character. He works at a bar in Cudahy called the Salty Dog. This
Oh
is
man,
sort
we
of
gotta go.
yes, yeah. I've been there. I've been there to talk to Kristan. It is his sort of headquarters. That's where he operates out of, the Salty Dog. Um,
So jealous. I'm so jealous. I picture this as like a bat cave situation, except
yes,
like very nautically themed, and like there's two dudes at the end of the bar, just like drinking Scotch old fashions and salty dogs, which are delicious. Okay, go on.
yes.
I'm with you.
He makes a very excellent Bloody Mary with his own spice infused vodkas.
Tasty. Okay.
So, and I actually I know him because the Rundown Live crew came to the first Milwaukee Paranormal Conference, and they did some interviews and shot footage there. And then Kristan actually was a speaker the next year. He talked about discoveries of skeletons of giants was his topic.
Yes, amazing. Now this is that transhumanist character, right?
Yes, I was just gonna say, 2019, I wrote an article about him, and it was about how he was a candidate for president of the United States, or he was a candidate for the Transhumanist Party, who wanted to select a representative to be the candidate for president of the United
I
States.
I didn't really understand who the transhumanists were, and when I
Yeah.
asked casually, someone mentioned that they were a left libertarian leaning political party. And so I was like, okay, I'm interested. I'd let that guy buy me a beer. What's it about? Boy, oh boy, it sure is about more things than that.
Yes, yes.
Transhumanism, really, really. That's some Walt
It,
Disney shit they got going on over at the
yeah.
salty dog.
So, what it is transhumanism. Their main platform is that they are looking for ways to extend human life with the
Right,
hope that eventually you will be immortal. And
right.
that, like I said in this article, you can get your clones of your organs replaced kind of like an oil change,
Sure.
and you'll get robotic limbs and they'll upload your brain to like a hard drive, and so your
Okay.
body will just kind of regenerate over and over again.
Okay, here's the thing that I don't understand about this position, and maybe you can answer these questions for me because I'm sure you've gone down way deeper rabbit holes with the transhumanist thing than I have. First of all, if I'm not mistaken, in real life, the technology to regrow your individual organs from your own stem cells is
Mhm.
actually already a thing that's totally possible. Am I wrong about that? They
I
collect the
think
stem
so.
cells
Yeah.
actually from the inside of your stomach lining. They don't come from little dead babies or whatever. The cells in the inside of your stomach lining are actually better for that because they're your cells and they're cells that are very easy to just reprogram, or they get them from the inside of your teeth. But hypothetically, they can already do that. Part of the reason that they can't was because um, the legislation that forbids like working with stem cells is not like the language is not very specific. It just says stem cells, and like without any consideration of the fact that like stem cells don't necessarily come from fetal tissue. So that's a thing. And I know that is it is it old Muskie? Is it old Elon who's working on that thing where he says he already has the technology to load your brain into a hard drive or whatever?
Sounds
I think
like him. Yeah.
that sounds like some fucking foolishness that old Muskie would get up to. So I guess my question is, how is that a political position? I mean, that technology is a thing. What is their deal to make it so that it's more accessible to people, or that it is only accessible to certain? What
Uh,
Where does the politics come in there?
I think it's not so much as politics as they are trying to bring attention and awareness to this cause because they think it's important, because they want
Yeah,
to live forever. So they want this to be
sure.
like top of the list. You know, maybe in the same way that like the Green Party would have environmentalism at the top of their agenda, you know.
Okay.
So I think, and I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all because I am perfectly happy with one lifetime. I do not
Right.
want to live forever.
I'm
I
so
was like,
easily bored. I can't even imagine.
I was
I
like,
can't.
I don't want to be alive for, you know, I'd be so bored, so bored. I'm completely happy
Yeah.
with the human life cycle as it
Yeah.
is right now.
I feel like I'm a person who like I kind of like sort of believe in reincarnation. To me, the idea of living forever would be like wearing the same pair of underwear for the rest of your life. At some point, you need to take that shit off and wash it and put on a different pair of drawers, right? Like think
Mm,
that's I do think that if the technology to grow organs technically exists, and it's definitely a possibility that just needs more funding to make it readily available, then that's absolutely a thing that should be first and foremost in the front of the line, because like there are people who definitely die on the waiting list for organs to be transplanted, and they have to be on anti-rejection medication for the rest of your life. Hypothetically, if you get your own organ, you don't have to be on anti-rejection medication, you'll be fine. But they also were talking about that designer baby thing. That's a little bit more gross. A little,
yes, and this is actually candidate Harris got into an argument with another person who was vying for the position about that exact topic.
what was
Uh,
that guy's name? Did I read that correctly?
oh yeah, he had a strange. They're all like this mix of weird like cyberpunks and like nuclear engineers and very
Yeah,
eclectic crew.
sure.
Um, so he challenged this guy to a debate over designer babies, and
Yeah.
the guy did not accept. But unfortunately, I think Harris did not win the party's nomination. I think he was
Who
in the top four, but uh, I
who
can't
won?
remember. I can't remember who won the nomination for the party that year.
Shit. I
But
can't believe they didn't team up with Orb Mom, Marianne Williamson. And just go on. Dude, that would have been so cool. The cyber hippie ticket. Fuck yeah. I'd have been 100% out campaigning for that shit. Mad.
but uh, but he was close, and then who knows if he was a candidate, maybe he would have become president of the United States.
Well, considering who ultimately became president of the United States, I guess I'd say that's as likely as anything.
Right,
It's
right.
entirely possible. But so he's one of these citizens, though, is what you're saying,
He was one of the three people I interviewed for my
right?
article, and he was there in Kenosha. He went to Minneapolis to cover some protests there, and at least two out of three of the people I interviewed were in Washington D.C. on January 6th, the day of the
Oh,
insurrection. So a lot of footage that you've probably seen on TV
was
comes from
from
these guys.
them.
Yeah, they were
That
there,
makes a lot of sense.
and several other events all over the country. And I mean, all of them interesting characters. I very briefly mentioned in my article a citizen journalist from Kenosha, Corey Elijah, and he's kind of well known in Kenosha, and it's pretty awesome because he captures a lot of his footage while he's zooming around on a skateboard. So he's kind of a skateboarding citizen journalist.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. We got to get some citizen journalists on those. What are those things called? It's just one wheel. You put your feet on either side. You zoom around, that kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. I don't know what it's called, but I can see someone writing this in my head. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I wonder if there's any. I wonder if there's any networks that are kind of like secretly contributing to these people's GoFundMe's and stuff to get them to these other places because they know that these people will go into places. I mean, they can't. It's the gig economy. Like they
Yeah.
can't afford to have these journalists on staff. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they're like, "Hey, who would like to see me in Kenosha?" And like CNBC is like, "Fuck yeah, here's $200. Get yourself an economy seat. Hope
Yeah.
you don't get shot." It's like they were going anyway. Fuck it. A
Here's what we were trying
hoverboard?
to think of. A
Is it
hoverboard.
called?
Yeah,
Is
maybe. I
it?
think so.
Is it really called a hoverboard? I was promised like a hoverboard is supposed to be like Back to
Like,
the Future type
yeah,
stuff.
right. Back to the Future Part Two, where he's cruising around on a hover skateboard. It's
And
awesome.
part three, where Doc Brown gets saved from the runaway train because Marty sails the hoverboard back to him. Great stuff. Yeah, I thought hoverboards were supposed to hover. That's bullshit. I disapprove of that branding. That's garbage. Oh man. So are any of the citizen journalist people also involved in with like all of this stuff seems so interconnected? Because we were talking about the big UFO information dump that's supposed to happen
Yes.
next week or whatever, next month. They had
Next
100
180-day countdown. Yeah.
right, 180 days from the 27th of December or some shit like that. So pretty soon, pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it landed somewhere between June 20th and June 24th, something like that.
Sure.
So,
Right.
yeah, it's a big story. I was able to see 60 Minutes did a segment on this week, which a lot of people
Sure.
saw. And yeah, it's UFO disclosure is supposed to be happening next month. This got snuck into a COVID bill that passed in December, but amongst the 5,000 pages of this bill was a bunch of things that people had snuck in, and one of them was a demand for UFO disclosure. And this is something that's been lobbied very heavily by some former members of the Department of Defense. And they
Mm.
kind of pitched their case to people like Senator Marco Rubio, little Marco Rubio, as Trump used to call him. Um, Kamala Harris, when she was a senator, they had a meeting
Sure.
with Kamala Harris and several other senators. So um, in the 60 Minutes interview, they showed a bunch of this very strange footage that was captured by Air Force pilots,
Sure.
and some of them were saying that they would see these UFOs almost every day that they were out,
Yeah.
and they have no explanation for what they could be, which
Yeah.
is pretty freaky. And they really made the argument that we need to know what's going on here, because whether it's extraterrestrial or like some technology that Russia has that we don't,
Right.
it's
Right.
important to not kind of laugh about this and say,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's the little green men, ha ha ha," people seeing
Yeah.
UFOs.
I think it's funny because the people who are in charge of like our government decisions now are not the same generation of people who were in charge when we were kids.
Yeah,
These are people who also grew up with like X-Files and,
yeah, yeah,
Star Trek
absolutely.
and stuff like that. And like I would think that their range for belief, like I feel like most like millennials, like exennial people, um, kind of believe that UFOs are real, but don't think it matters in the grand scheme of things, is kind of the flavor that I get from most people. Like, yeah, probably so, kind of thing. And there's definitely people who also think, and this was part of the debate, because my first response on hearing that the government was going to make this big UFO dump was the same as this person that you talked to, where he was essentially like, yeah, when they say big information dump, what they mean is we're going to get a binder with 6,000 pages of just black Sharpie
Black
bars
marker, yeah.
written through it and like the word dog. And like that's going to be the big dump and everything's going to be classified. I think the government probably knows a whole lot about what's going on because they've been studying it with their vast resources for years and years and years. They have like their capacity to store that kind of information is pretty tremendous. But I think probably what they know is that there are these crafts that they've never been able to identify, and they exist and they happen, and we don't know what they are or where they come from. But the general consensus is that the technology to make that happen. I think I saw an
Mhm.
article 2 days ago that said that there was some general, and they didn't quote the actual general, but they said that his name was part of this disclosure. That the technology that was needed to achieve the speeds and maneuvering that they saw in the sky was somewhere between 100 and 1,000 years beyond what we've got. And I'm sorry, China doesn't have that shit.
Yeah,
Russia doesn't
yeah,
have that shit. That's fucking crazy.
yeah.
However, there are people who suggest the deep, deep conspiracy, which is like aliens are among us. They've been living on this planet studying us for years, like sociological, like in the jungle with the mountain gorillas, Jane Goodall type shit, except they're in New Jersey, learning how to eat chili cheese dogs and that kind of thing, to all the way like lizards in the government, all that kind of shit.
Right, the reptilians.
The reptilians who are also they're communicating with, oh dude, I saw the best video on YouTube the other day. I should have sent you the link right away. This guy's whole thing was that Bigfoots were telepathically uh uh
Oh, kind of.
telepathically communicating with the lizard people who run the government. And that's why we never see them, because the lizard people protect the Bigfoots, because the Bigfoots are like their field agents or whatever. And I was like, first of all, I'm listening. It's 3 in the morning. I got a sandwich. Fucking don't stop now, Bo. Like keep going. Um, so like that's obviously if that were the case, like they're not gonna tell us, like, yeah, Atlantic City is just pretty much all aliens. Like they're not gonna
Right,
it'll be classified, right? Like, did
right, right.
you read the little bit in the bill? Like what was the wording of it? How much disclosure do they have to give us?
I didn't read the exact wording of it actually. But if people are curious on this topic, by the way, in the show notes for the podcast version of this, or you can just keep scrolling down. Last season, episode 3, we did an episode called Countdown to UFO Disclosure. And it featured an interview I did with the person that Heidi was mentioning, Ryan Sprague. Very cool guy, very up to speed on all of this. And he kind of explained to me how this actually happened and what some of our expectations might be. Which is he's not hoping for much. He thinks that they're gonna, like you said, try to just kind of pass off the minimal information that they can. But we'll
Right.
see. Who knows? There might be something very interesting.
My favorite thing about this person is that he said he's like the UFO correspondent for
Yeah, yeah,
this new, because this news service is technically like it's an independent show too, right? Like doesn't it's
yeah.
not on a it's just a podcast or whatever.
Yeah. Well, he runs a podcast called Somewhere in the Skies, which is great. He
Mhm.
has excellent, excellent guests all the time that are experts on UFOs. And he also writes for a website called The Debrief. And that
Sure,
specializes in like secret technology, UFOs, interesting technology stories in general.
sure.
So, very cool website if you're interested in that type of stuff.
I'm just real jealous that he's the UFO correspondent.
All
Like
right.
that's pretty dope.
It's a good gig. Yeah.
I hope that he has a door somewhere where he's like,
Ryan Sprague, UFO correspondent. Yeah.
yeah, I think he should, so that he has something to send to his mother. 'Cause
Mhm.
that's some good shit, boo. Awesome. Super cool. Well, I'm looking forward to figuring it out. I think we should start a pool, like a fantasy football situation about what information the government is going to disclose to us plebs about the alien quote unquote situation.
Well, we could start. We have a really awesome Tease Weird Week Facebook group. If you're not a member, you should join. We could definitely start like a poll in there. We can
Hmm.
see what the popular consensus is.
I think we
But
should.
yeah.
I really think we should. I also think it's interesting that this character, uh, he's got like connections, and I don't want to say informants, that sounds very devious, but like he was talking about his people in the Pentagon and his
Yeah.
people in the White House. And like,
Hmm.
that's because once
Yeah.
upon a time, we're at a place where the government's like, yeah, we saw some weird shit. They don't call them UFOs anymore, though. They call them unidentified
UAPs. Yeah.
aerial, yeah,
Phenomenon.
some
Yeah. Yeah.
some kind of shit like that.
Yeah.
Yes, we've seen them. Yes, that's a real thing. Yes, it's fine. But like even 15, 20 years ago, you couldn't have been a UFO person who could say that you had connections. And let me call my guy at the Pentagon, where you're like, hey, this is the UFO guy. And he's like, oh, hey. Yeah, you're not going to believe this shit. Like, there's some UFO things going. Like, you could, like, all these, it's so hard to know what's true and what's not true because the reality is the government told us for years that that was fucking crazy. There was no such thing as UFOs. There's no such thing as Area 51. We now know that Area 51 was at the very least a super high tech like testing ground for very intense secret aeronautic stuff. There's been documentaries and stuff. What was it called? Pipeworks, Steamworks, Dreamworks, whatever that like secret web of the government was
Oh yeah.
invented by
Skunk Works.
Obama. Skunkworks. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it smelled bad. There's some great documentaries, but they told us all this shit wasn't true, and they looked at us like we were crazy, like you couldn't say that stuff out loud. And now that we know that this whole time it entirely was true, it's very hard to be like you don't know. Maybe there are fucking lizard people. I have no like our baseline for reality is so whack. Like we have no baseline for reality anymore. It's not a thing.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to this story because I want to get to it. Pretty intense going back to the street on street level. A story out of Little Rock, Arkansas. There's a real life superhero that calls himself Shadow Vision.
Hmm.
If you didn't know, I wrote my first book was titled Heroes in the Night, and it is all about the real life superhero subculture or movement.
Hmm.
And it's people that adopt their own superhero personas to try to, fight crime or to publicize a cause or to do humanitarian work. And this episode, if you're listening to the podcast version, we start off with an interview with Misfit, really cool real life superhero, who has this big charity event that she does every year. Shadow Vision, though, has a little bit different crusade, I guess. He says that he is hunting a serial killer. There is
Yeah.
a serial killer in Little Rock that has killed 3 people and injured another one
Hmm.
over the last year. But his claims, he says that sort of his origin story was that a serial killer killed his mom. He also says that he has exterminated 2 serial killers already,
And
which
stopped
I
an armed
guess,
robbery.
and so I guess that would make him a serial killer of serial killers.
A serial killer, if
Right.
you know what I mean.
Here's
Cool.
something. Here's something I found on his Facebook page, which I mean, this has always kind of cracked me up. Can you imagine Batman like sitting at his computer in his Batcave, and he's like, "I'm gonna do a Facebook post. Next time I see you on the street, Joker, I'm gonna kick your ass."
No, but I
This-
did used to imagine that he had a tiny Lisa Frank diary. And he would come home and Alfred would go and make him soup. And while Alfred was doing that, he'd be sitting down and be going, Dear diary, today was the worst.
So here is a Facebook post by Shadow Vision. It says, I know that the serial stabber is keeping an eye on my page here. So this is a threat to you. When I find you, I will show you what I do to serial killers. I am hunting you right now.
Okay. Okay. So, first of all, oh, where do I start? First of all, when I first heard this, I thought that Shadow Vision was a real dumb name for a superhero because does not imply that you can't see where you're going. That'd be like naming yourself Club, something like that. But I looked it up and I found out what Shadow Vision means. Are you ready? This is
Yeah.
awesome. Shadow Vision was a force power that was formulated by the disciples of twilight. The users of the ability could use the force to gain low light vision, allowing them to ignore the concealment of darkness.
Wow. Pretty
So now we
intense.
know, right? Pretty intense. Secondly, okay, like he's claimed to have exterminated 2 serial killers, right?
Yeah.
All that means to me is that he knows how to use a shovel, which I mean, like, good on you, really cool. But does he have super detective detecting powers as well, like the man bat? Or is he just hoping to stumble into this guy? Because the other thing that I found out about Shadow Vision on his Facebook page is that he doesn't have a car. And this is
Yes.
very problematic for
And
him,
he's trying to solicit funds, like
right?
getting donations via PayPal so he
Yeah,
can get a car so he doesn't have to run after a serial killer driving away from him on
right.
foot.
How embarrassing would that be as a
Yeah.
superhero
Come
if
back here.
like you can see him getting the guy's getting into his Subaru, he's called an Uber, and poof, he's gone. That would be embarrassing. We should, yeah. Tell Shadow Vision I have an old Toyota Camry in my driveway. There's an exhaust leak, but he can have it because I want him to be able to catch this serial stabber.
And to describe this guy, by the way, he wears all black sort of motocross gear, looks kind of like a ninja. He carries katanas,
Yeah,
swords with him while he patrols.
yeah,
I got a lot of information on this, by the way, from the Arkansas Times. We'll link that article in the show notes as well. But also, I'm still in touch with a lot of real life superheroes from when I
sure.
worked on that project, and a lot of them are really cool people. I've met a lot of really cool real life superheroes who are not delusional and have good hearts and are trying to improve their communities.
Yeah,
But I don't exactly have my finger on the pulse of the community as far as who's involved with it now. But there is someone, and this person asked to remain anonymous, but I contacted them because I know that they're very knowledgeable about what's going on. And they had some interesting things to say. Uh, uh,
about Shadow Vision.
yeah.
Wait, they
Uh,
got the T on Shadow Vision.
yes, yeah. So this person says that they first noticed them that this person was involved with RLSH in October of 2019. He was going by the name Switchblade before he changed his name to Shadow Vision. He claimed his motive for starting was his mother being killed by a serial killer in
Okay,
1985. But this person found the person's real name and found out that his mother is still alive. Um,
sure.
I asked him about it, and he kept acting like his story was true and got angry when confronted. He made up other things about fighting and killing serial killers and gang bangers, and even rescuing 3 people in the woods that were locked up in a storage unit in North Carolina. Um, More recently, he's claimed that his car was shot up, which is why he needs a new one. That his house was burned down. And the more worrying thing, this person says here, is that he's publicly challenging a serial killer who will never show up. But it is not very hard to find him and where he lives. His wife even publicly posted their address on her Facebook page. So my concern is that his family will be harmed instead if anything happens at all.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't go telling people where the Bat Cave is. You're not like, meet me down at the Salty Dog and also fuck you. That's not a good idea.
Right,
Like,
right.
did you, do they know anything about this serial killer? That, like, were these random,
Well,
is this a person people for fun, or is this like a organized crime shits, or like what's up with that, do you think?
I don't know what's known about the serial killer other than they have like a vague description of him, his
Okay.
height and race, but I don't know much more about what's going on with that other than it's creepy.
Yeah, I think that's not very safe. I think that's like if you're going to be a super like if you're going to make up a like pretty dramatic backstory because it's going to drive fear into the hearts of the villainy of Little Rock, I think that that's fine and like whatever. Maybe you had a great childhood and that's just not that interesting, but it's a lot harder to be a superhero if you go out and you're like, yeah, I had a 3.7 GPA. Now I'm an accountant.
It's
My
really
life's great.
it always makes me very nerve-wracked when I hear about some of these real life superhero guys who obviously they claim that they're a master of the martial arts or something. They're
Sure.
not. Clearly, they are not. I think the ones that are very successful are like Misfit, who does this great charity event every year, and some of them do like community organization or training people in self-defense or
Sure.
handing out food and supplies to homeless people, stuff like that. But the guys who are like walking around with a katana and a can of pepper spray or something because they want to
Yeah.
get in a fight with drug dealers, like they're just
Yeah.
putting themselves in danger, and at times also putting other people in danger too.
Right.
So
The
it's sort
idea that he exterminated two like, okay,
of
were they were these people in the act of killing and or serialing these people? Or did you just find a guy and you're like, that's
totally.
the guy?
And this was like, for example, last year there was this ex-police officer who had been fired from his job, and he thought that he had found a van that was full of fake ballots and was going to deliver these fake ballots to a polling place. So he like ran this guy off the road and approached him with his gun drawn and thought that he had found this dude. And he opened up the back of the van, and it was full of tools and appliance parts because it was a air conditioner repairman. So, a lot of people or some of these people are wrong about their assumptions of what is going on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, like I mean I understand the justice system is pretty screwed up and like justice doesn't always get served that way. Totally get it. Wait, Shadow Vision would also be a great name for a goth themed optometrist.
yeah, that's a comment we just got here on Facebook.
No, you're right. You're right. Um, yeah, the justice system is not perfect in our country by any stretch of the imagination. Uh, but like you can't just go around being like, I'm gonna exterminate you because I think you're a serial killer. Like, I'm gonna need to see your receipts, Shadow Vision,
Right.
Switchblade, whatever your name is. He's Scottish too, which I thought was weird. Like apparently he
Yes.
moved here from Scotland,
Oh, yeah. That reminds me. Oh, this is so
right?
great. Look, we can use this banner that I created: Wisconsin, Scotland, or Florida,
Oh,
which is a
right.
recurring theme here on the show because those are three places we talk a lot about. So
Oh
yes, he claims
man.
that he moved here from Scotland 8 years ago, which is why he has a strange accent. However, my anonymous source here discovered that in fact he is not from Scotland and that he just enjoys speaking with a Scottish accent.
Sounds like somebody who like I don't know, watched too much Doctor Who or something. So wait, hold on. So he's a Scottish Jedi ninja? Is that
Of and fake in all those categories
well,
too.
that's muddy, is what that is. It's not tidy at all. Not at all. I feel like
Put your hands in the air, laddie.
he should wear a kilt if he's gonna be Scottish. I just don't get it. If I was like pretending, especially like I was picking any nationality as part of my persona and
Yeah.
it was gonna be Scottish, wouldn't you like wear a kilt for sure? Wouldn't that be part of your whole thing? Would be like flashing the bad guy, right? Like putting them in shock with your hairy Scottish rear end, and then you like donkey punch him or something. Because that's how a Scottish superhero would do it. He would donkey punch everyone, and then he would have a pint. That is what would happen. Wow, what a fucking mess. Yeah,
Yeah,
pick a theme,
yeah,
dude. Pick a
yeah.
fucking theme. Get
And
it together.
this really is only scratching the surface because I also know two of the guys who are in his crew there in Little Rock, and they are both also notorious in the RLSH community as being, I don't even know how to describe it. Uh
Colorful?
Beyond really off the wall. And I'm not even going to mention their names because I don't even want to go there right now. But maybe in the future we'll do a more
Wait.
in-depth episode on the real life superheroes of Little Rock, Arkansas.
I
You might
think
have
we
to add
should.
Arkansas to this banner. Florida, Wisconsin, Scotland, or Arkansas.
Yeah. I think, didn't we say already that Wisconsin was, what, Wisconsin is the Scotland of America, or Scotland is the Wisconsin. Yeah, because someplace else was the New Jersey. We're not going to talk about that anymore, though. What is this? The action film named after Shadow Vision must be called "So I Exterminated an Axe Murderer," Axe Murderers, or "So I Exterminated an Axe Murderer Part One," and "So I Exterminated an Axe Murderer Part Two,"
Yeah.
Electric Boogaloo, Scottish Boogaloo. Cheesery. It's too bad too because like that's got to be hard fighting for legitimacy as like a person who dresses up in fucking spandex and is like I'm a superhero now because I decided it.
Yeah.
And there are people like Misfit who are like I know that there are real life superheroes in other places too who do things like wait at the bus station in bad parts of town to walk people to their car from the bus station. Like this
Yeah.
is a bad bus station, we'll walk with you. Like doing legitimate things that are just like actually trying to help out their communities. In the
Yeah.
meantime, you got
Absolutely.
Scottish Jedi ninjas fucking around, exterminating motherfuckers left and right. Like,
Yeah, and it's really bad because the media, of course, are very rarely interested in like a normal kind of heartwarming story. But if some guy in spandex jumps out and is like, "Woo! I've got superpowers and I'm here to kill serial killers," of course, you know, if it bleeds, it leads, and they're going to go for that story because it's going to get a lot more eyeballs on the headline and stuff like that.
yeah. You know what's real scary though, T, is that like if this is a I mean, I guess I don't want to cast any sort of dispersions on anybody, but like what if there's no serial killer?
Mm,
What if there is no serial killer? If this guy's the kind of guy who's gonna like get real upset when people find out his mom wasn't murdered and stuff like that, and he wanted to be taken seriously, like it wouldn't be beyond Beyond. But if there is a serial killer and this person gets tired because he's a lunatic or like someone who has no control, no reference for reality, and something terrible happens to his wife, for example, to Shadow Vision's wife, God forbid,
mm.
I wonder what will happen as a result of that. Like, will it vulcanize other people to want to like try and catch this character? Will it lend more legitimacy to this group of people, or will it result in legislation where people are like you can't do this superhero shit anymore. It's dangerous, you know, all because one guy was like, yeah, I'm coming
Yeah,
for you,
they've had real mixed relationship with law enforcement.
right?
And you know, there has been talks of something like in the Watchmen, there was something called the Keene Act where superheroes were outlawed.
Right.
So, you know, it could be something like that. Andrew just asked a great question. And again, I could go way into this, but I'll give you the short
Heidi.
version. He messaged and said,
What happened? Oh yeah.
I'm still waiting for real life supervillains. So,
Uh-huh.
as it turns out, they do exist. However, most of them are what I would call costume trolls.
Right.
And so, like, let's say, you know, I see this story about Shadow Vision, and then I would make like a supervillain costume and sit here at my desk and make a video where I'm
Talk
threatening to
about how
kick
he
his
was a punk
ass. And
ass.
yes, right, exactly. So
Yeah.
there was what I called in my book Heroes of the Night an anti-movement or a subculture that was, you know,
Yeah.
mostly just like internet trolls. Some of them actually kind of became friends with some of the superheroes and would participate in like
Sure.
their charity events and stuff like that.
Sure, but if
But
you like if you look at fiction, if you look at like our fiction, like American mythology, which is what all that superhero shit is. It's American mythology.
Mhm.
Um, the best supervillains were always the ones that were sympathetic. They were the ones who did not believe they were villains. They believed that they were in the right,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes they even started out as like this character who you believed was trying to do right. Doc Ock, for example. You take Doc Ock. Doc Ock's wife got all murder-fied and shit. Like that happened.
Yeah.
That was real life. Lex Luthor had a very sad backstory. Like all the big time villains, you didn't know that they were villains until you knew they were villains. So my guess
Yeah.
is there probably are some super villains out there. Um,
Well, in particular, in the real life superhero community, I think you're right. Is probably people who think that their heroes are actually the real villains of this community because they're
mhm.
doing a disservice to the people who are trying to actually do something good, and
Right,
they're kind of messing it up by running around and
right,
punching drug dealers and stuff like that.
right. Well, plus if you look like God, who is that one? Who's that one incel kid who ran all those people over a couple of years ago? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, ran
He,
into a crowd with a vehicle.
right, he wrote this
Yeah,
long manifesto before he did that. And in this manifesto, he clearly believed that he was doing something heroic, that he was sacrificing his life or his freedom or both to send a message that he was that he was speaking for all these voiceless people. Like he honestly believed that he was a hero, and there were corners of the internet that absolutely hailed him as a hero. Kyle Rittenhouse, there are
yeah,
people who think that guy was a hero. I've
yeah.
seen him.
He got $2 million in bail money.
Yeah, he
Include
got $2 million in bail money. He got on television.
Yeah,
I've seen pictures of him with famous celebrities and like,
yeah. Part of the money came from Ricky Schroeder, star of the classic sitcom Silver Spoons, and another big contributor was Mike Lindell, who is the CEO of My Pillow.
sure,
But
sure. But yeah, the point is that like they made T-shirts and shit
yeah.
that said like that he was a hero and that was a real life thing that really happened. I was watching Last Week Tonight, which I enjoy despite my kids' protests. I was talking about this one guy in Texas who like called 911 because there were these two people breaking into his neighbor's house.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
on the phone, he's like, "I'm gonna go over there and stop these because I have a shotgun." And the 911 dispatcher was like, "Do not do that. Please do not do that because like you're safe. You're inside of your home. The law in Texas says that you can stand your ground. It's a stand your ground law." Somehow, this guy didn't spend a minute in jail, despite the fact that what was happening was not on his property and that he was under no threat at all of bodily harm. He left his house, went and shot them, and then the autopsy showed that they were shot in the back. He shot both of them in the back. So as they were running away from him, and they had a parade for this dude, like a full on fucking ticker tape parade for this dude. So yeah, they'll be a supervillain, and it'll be somebody who's been super empowered by some sense of like being the only person who can fix a problem, and the solution that they have come up with is some kind of violence. It's happened before. It'll
Yeah,
happen again.
yeah,
Eventually, somebody will do it in a cape. That's all I'm trying to say.
yeah,
Sooner or
yeah.
later.
My favorite real life supervillain guy, by the way, I'm still friends with him on Facebook or Twitter. I have no idea what his real name is. I have no idea where he lives. I don't know anything about him. He wears this mask that's like bronze and it has like these mouthpieces on it and
Right.
a lab coat and some sunglasses.
Yes.
And he calls himself Lord Malignance. And he would
Oh.
make these call out videos and they all started the same way. You'd see him standing there in his costume, and he would say, "My name is Lord Malignance, and you will crouch before me." And then he would talk about the superheroes, and it was very dramatic. But I loved watching his videos. So I don't know. I don't know if he's still out there doing the supervillain thing or not. But
Well,
interesting
you got
character.
You got to invite them to the barbecue, T.
Yeah,
All these
yeah,
people are
absolutely,
coming to the barbecue. It's going to be a pool
absolutely.
party. It's going to be superheroes, super villains,
Yeah.
Zorth, the guy from Ireland who talks like it's going to be a hullabaloo, a regular hoot nanny. Can't wait to meet him. That's good
Yeah,
stuff. You have
yeah.
enough friends, T.
It would be really fun to gather a lot of these people together in one
I think
place.
we
It would be
should.
very
I
interesting.
I
Yeah,
think
we
we
can try.
should. I think
We'll
we
do
should, and I think we should.
we'll do the Tease Weird Week company picnic.
Yep, and we'll give away 5 tickets to lucky Patreon benefactors. Anybody who contributes more than $1,000 can get a free ticket to the Teas Company picnic.
That'd be awesome. Awesome.
Could be.
Okay, well, we got a couple stories we're gonna bump to next week, I think, because we're out of time. But yeah, these were some pretty intense street level stories that we covered this
Yeah,
week.
they were meaty. Some meaty
Yeah.
stories.
Yes, indeed. Make sure to check out tcrulos.com. You can see past episodes of the podcast there, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.